And now it's about becoming not just a great player, but becoming a great leader for this team so that we can win not just a championship, but championships. And what does that look like?
Christy Sides, who took over the head coaching role for the Indiana Fever, had a tough task ahead of her. Coming into a team that had struggled for years to establish itself as a legitimate contender.
That players are like, this ain't where I want to be.
Over there.
Yeah. So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't
want to be.
Sides inherited a roster filled with both potential and pressure. Players like Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and Aaliyah Boston were starting to emerge as stars. But the challenge of molding this talent into a cohesive unit proved too much for Sides. Despite the hype surrounding the Fever's roster, Sides' tenure was a series of missteps, missed opportunities, and failed potential.
They're all hungry to grow and hungry to improve and hungry to be coached and hungry to win. And when you have three foundational players and your big three that have that mindset, have that mentality. And
when the team failed to meet expectations, it didn't take long for the media to speculate about the reasons behind the Fever's inability to capitalize on their talent. And then came the firing. Christy Sides was let go, much to the dismay of many, including Sheryl Swoopes, a former WNBA legend and outspoken supporter of her close friend Christy. Swoopes didn't take kindly to the decision and immediately went on the offensive. She accused the Fever's front office of unfairly targeting Christy and claimed that the entire situation was a political move. But was this the truth? Or was it simply a narrative being pushed by someone with an emotional attachment to the situation?
20 points, 8.4 assists, 6 rebounds.
That's crazy.
But 5.6
Those are hell of a number.
Those are hell of a number.
But to me, that's not dominating.
Sheryl Swoopes, in her passionate defense of Christy Sides, made several strong claims about the situation. She went on and on about the injustice of the firing and how Sides had been treated unfairly by the Fever. However, as much as one might sympathize with Swoopes' perspective, there was a glaring issue. Christy Sides' coaching simply wasn't producing results. The Fever had a disastrous season under her watch. Their performance was so poor that fans were begging for a change halfway through the year. The team's roster, filled with promising talent, wasn't performing up to expectations. And while some people tried to blame the players or the media...
what is going on in their locker room? Like, this Aces team is falling apart. This is not a coach that I would want to play for.
The harsh truth was that Christy Sides wasn't getting the best out of her squad. Even more shocking was her apparent inability to make basic in-game decisions. Take, for example, her failure to call timely timeouts. During a critical stretch in one game, the Fever were getting blown out by a 21-0 run from the opposing team. And Sides did nothing.
Christy Sides, you should take absolutely zero responsibility for the growth that this team has shown.
No timeout, no change in strategy. It was a moment of utter negligence. Any seasoned coach would have called a timeout to reset and regroup the team, but Sides didn't. That wasn't just bad coaching, it was borderline malpractice. In the midst of the Fever's struggles, one player stood out like a beacon of hope: Caitlin Clark. Known for her exceptional talent, Clark had already established herself as one of the most electrifying players in college basketball. But now, playing for the Fever, she was thrust into the role of a team leader. With her incredible scoring ability and basketball IQ, Caitlin had the potential to carry the team on her back. But under Sides' coaching, Caitlin wasn't being used to her full potential. Clark was benched at critical moments, and the team seemed to struggle with how to harness her star power. But why? If a coach can't even manage a generational talent like Clark...
what she goes through on a daily basis, she carries a heavy load, right? With our league and with
then how can they be expected to lead a team to success? Unfortunately, this was one of the fatal flaws in Sides' strategy. Instead of empowering Clark and letting her shine, the coach seemed to stifle her growth by making questionable decisions. When the Fever made the decision to fire Sides, they didn't have to look far for her replacement. Stephanie White, a familiar face to the Fever organization, was brought back to reclaim the head coaching role.
With her abilities, certainly, but where we are from this tipping point in the WNBA and from popularity...
White had been a key part of the Fever's past success, leading them to playoff appearances and even a WNBA championship. Sheryl Swoopes, a legendary figure in women's basketball, has always been a voice of passion and conviction. However, her emotional defense of Christy Sides, former head coach of the Indiana Fever, has sparked a wave of controversy and debate. In her efforts to protect her friend, Swoopes attempted to paint Stephanie White's return to the Fever as a shady move, accusing it of being a backdoor deal or a politically motivated maneuver. But in reality, the truth is far simpler and much more logical than the dramatic narrative that Swoopes tried to construct.
It's really exciting. I mean, certainly, you think about Kelsey Mitchell, and she's been through the lulls in the Indiana Fever franchise, and now to be on the other side of that, as a
Stephanie White's return to the Indiana Fever wasn't the result of a shady, secretive plot. It was the natural and most sensible choice for a franchise in need of stability and leadership. White had been a part of the Fever organization for years, dating back to 2011. She was no stranger to the team's culture, the players, or the challenges that came with coaching in the WNBA. Under her leadership, the Fever had not only made the playoffs, but also secured a WNBA championship in 2012.
As a cornerstone, and every team has a big three, right? And you think about having a great wing like her, and a great point guard, and a generational player in Caitlin Clark, and a great post player in Aaliyah Boston.
A testament to her effectiveness as a coach. What Swoopes failed to acknowledge is that Stephanie White's return wasn't an opportunistic move. It was a strategic one. With the Fever in disarray under Sides' leadership, the organization needed a coach who not only understood the inner workings of the team, but also had a proven track record of success. White had done it before, and she was the best candidate to guide the Fever back to relevancy.
Not take a timeout if her life depended on it, while the other team was, I think at one point this year, there was a 21-0 run.
Her coaching style, combined with her deep understanding of the Fever's players, made her the logical choice to take over the reins again. The team needed a coach who could build trust, establish clear strategies, and most importantly, get results. And with White at the helm, the Fever were poised for a return to form. As if the situation weren't already complicated enough, Sheryl Swoopes tried to inject further drama into the situation by spinning Stephanie White's departure from the Connecticut Sun into some sort of scandal. Swoopes suggested that White's exit from Connecticut was part of a larger, more sinister plot to take over Christy Sides' job in Indiana.
And she failed to call a timeout. Nonsensical substitutions at all the wrong times, benchings, leaving Caitlin Clark on the bench
However,
too.
This narrative is far from the truth. In reality, White's departure from Connecticut was based on personal reasons, as she herself explained. It was simply a personal decision, one that had nothing to do with any grand scheme to undermine Christy Sides or anyone else. Yet, Swoopes, ever the dramatist, tried to turn this into a storyline that would fit her narrative. She attempted to make White's departure appear as though it was part of a covert operation to wrestle away Sides' job. This type of thinking, driven by emotions and not logic, doesn't help anyone involved. In reality, White's decision to leave Connecticut wasn't shrouded in controversy.
Behind closed doors, those team bonding exercises, that's good for an HR person, but that's not good for a head coach. You need to actually coach.
It was simply a coach making a decision to prioritize her personal life. That's a choice that many people can relate to, but it doesn't fit the narrative Swoopes was hoping to push. While Swoopes focused much of her energy on defending Christy Sides, she seemed to completely overlook the contributions of Kelsey Mitchell, a key player for the Indiana Fever. Kelsey Mitchell was the backbone of the Fever's offense throughout the season. While Caitlin Clark certainly garnered much of the media attention, it was Mitchell who consistently stepped up in crucial moments, making her a true leader on the court. Swoopes, however, ignored this fact.
All we do is have fun. With Caitlin Clark, who never takes anything serious. Like, I tell people all the time, she's really a kid at heart.
Because it didn't fit into the narrative she was trying to create. Instead of focusing on Mitchell's impressive stats and her role in keeping the Fever competitive, Swoopes chose to keep the spotlight on Clark, largely ignoring Mitchell's contributions. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a clear attempt to minimize the importance of one of the Fever's most valuable players. Mitchell, however, deserves all the recognition she has earned, as her hard work and consistency were crucial to the Fever's performance. When looking at the larger picture, it becomes clear why the Indiana Fever struggled under Christy Sides. It wasn't just a matter of bad luck. It was a matter of poor coaching decisions and a lack of clear strategy. The team's overall record under Sides was underwhelming, and there were many moments throughout the season that exposed her inability to handle the pressure of being a head coach in the WNBA. Sides made countless mistakes that only furthered the team's struggles. One of the most glaring issues was her inability to manage timeouts. During several critical games,
It felt like they were winning in spite of her. Like they were having to play the opposing team and their own coach at times.
The Fever went on long scoring droughts, and yet Sides failed to call timeouts to stop the momentum and regroup her team. This is a basic coaching decision, yet it was one that Sides continually failed to make. When your team is getting blown out, you need to call a timeout. It's coaching 101, and Sides missed that lesson time and time again. Another issue was her handling of player rotations and substitutions. Sides had no rhythm when it came to managing her roster. One of the most baffling decisions was benching Caitlin Clark at critical moments in the game. Any coach worth their salt knows that when you have a player like Clark on your roster, you let them play.
Christy Sides, you were clearly not maximizing the talent. You were not getting the best out of Caitlin Clark. You were not getting the best out of Kelsey Mitchell. You were not getting the best out of Aaliyah.
Especially in tight games. But Sides, for reasons unknown, chose to pull Clark from the game at times when her presence was desperately needed. This kind of decision-making is not just a minor mistake, it's a significant flaw that hindered the team's chances of winning. It's easy for Swoops to defend her friend, but the reality is that Christy Sides was simply not effective as a head coach. The Fever's struggles weren't a result of bad luck or a tough schedule. They were the direct result of poor coaching. The players, including Clark, Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston, had to shoulder the responsibility of carrying the team because the coaching staff was unable to make the necessary adjustments to improve the team's performance.
We were the best out of Lexi Hall, the best out of Katie Lou, the best out of Dantis, the best out of Temi Bentley. You were not getting. Caitlin Clark was getting the best out of them.
Now that Stephanie White has returned to lead the Indiana Fever, there is hope for the franchise's future. With a coach who has both experience and a proven track record, the Fever are on the right path. White knows how to get the best out of her players, and she's already showing signs of restoring the team to prominence. Under White's leadership, the Fever have a renewed sense of direction. The team is focused on building a strong foundation with players like Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston, who will form the core of the franchise for years to come. White's familiarity with the team and her leadership style have already begun to yield results, and the future looks bright for the Fever.
Personally, here's where I think they didn't do a very good job, and that was with Kelsey Mitchell, who's an unrestricted free agent, because Kelsey Mitchell had a hell of a season this season, and I don't think she got the credit that she deserved.
In the end, the decision to bring back Stephanie White as head coach of the Indiana Fever was the right one. While Sheryl Swoopes continues to fight for Christy Sides and push her own narrative, the truth remains clear. Sides was not able to get the job done. The Fever needed a change, and Stephanie White's return provided the stability and leadership the team desperately needed. As the Fever continue to rebuild, they have the right coach in place to help them reach their full potential. And as for Sheryl Swoopes, her defensive sides may continue. But sometimes the hardest thing for a friend to do is admit when their loved one simply didn't perform. The Fever are moving forward with a new sense of purpose, and the future is looking brighter than ever for this storied franchise.